This week, I got a pretty swell message from one of our new patrons. I'm not going to share the exact details of the message or the name of the person who shared it because I don't want to put private stuff out into public like that. But what I wanted to say was that the message from this person reached me at a particular time when I was feeling very overwhelmed and run down with the awfulness of our political climate and my own ineffectiveness in doing anything about it and the world we're creating for our children and grandchildren. And it's important to be aware of and take action against all that is wrong in our world. I also think it's important to recognize and appreciate the beauty we are capable of creating for others. And this message helped me realize that, at least on some small scale, Ari and I are actively participating in creating some space for folks to explore themselves, find themselves, and ultimately that's what this show sets out to do. So thanks for reaching out, new friend. Target and Dawn, thanks for becoming part of the family, friends. We're glad to have you.
We are the SJWs YouTube warn you about. This is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined once again by the mega uber fantabulous Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
Mega uber.
My thing is, like, I really like you, Ari, but I am also not creative. And so coming up with a new compliment for you, like, each time is, I'm failing at it. So
just
like,
start making up words that sound good. And then people will be like, wow, Callie's so smart. That's what I do.
And next thing you know, I'll get elected president. It's fine.
Yeah. You're too pale. You can't.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. So we're doing something a little different this week than we normally do. I actually at one point specifically said this wasn't a thing that we were going to do on the Gaytheist Manifesto. And actually, the other podcast that I was doing for kind of a minute started because I talked to someone who had an experience like this, and I thought, gosh, that's a really important experience and perspective to put out there. But like, I don't know if the Gaytheist Manifesto is a place to do that. But like, I've kind of decided that it is, given that like
because it's your damn show.
Well, I mean, there's that. And like, I mean, how many times have we talked about the fact that like atheism isn't necessarily the main organizing point of what we do anymore, right? Like it's more around just like social justice and queer and trans stuff generally. And so we have my good friend, Cindy Tucker, joining us. Welcome, friend.
Hello.
Cindy is a Christian and she is here to apologize for her religion.
Yay!
That would pretty much be, yeah. Just start out with, I'm sorry.
Right. So, you know, in atheist discourse a lot, you know, we see a lot of like, I don't know how you can be gay and Christian, or like, I don't know how you can be a woman and Christian. And like, I don't know how you can, and I'm like, I have so many.
I don't know how you can be a Christian.
Well, right, exactly. And
that would be the main point of the whole atheist thing.
Right,
or
right.
Anyone.
Well, the idea being that like, well, especially as a woman, you should be especially not Christian, or like, you know, or if you're gay, you should be especially not Christian because, you know, Christianity traditionally is uniquely hostile to whatever group of people that we're talking about. And like, I have lots of feelings around that. And some of them are like, I get where you're coming from, but like, also we're all people and like everybody, I don't know. That's a different conversation. So that being said, like given the fact that atheism is not necessarily like the primary organizing point of the stuff that we do anymore, and I mean, I'm definitely an atheist. But there are definitely still things that there is that part of me that's like, how can you be gay and Christian? I don't understand how that works. I don't understand how you reconcile that. And so that's the conversation that Cindy is here to have with us, because Cindy is someone I love a lot. And I've talked on the show before about the music venue in town that I used to run sound for, and how they were like the first group of folks who really made me feel like I'd have a soft place to land if things went bad for me when I came out. And that's how Cindy and I know each other. So Cindy is someone I love a lot, and I think we'll understand any of the questions we asked her asked in the honest intent to understand, and not as like challenging and dickish, like, oh, we got you, Christian, we're here to make you an atheist. Like, that's not what we're here for. So why don't you start out, just kind of give us a little bit of your background. Did you grow up in Christianity and mainstream Christianity, and what flavor of Christianity, and just sort of tell us your story?
Okay. First, I would say the term grow up, I would say I did not.
Okay.
Because typically when people say, did they grow up in church or grow up in Christianity, I picture that meaning like as a kid, like basically 9 months in the womb, like born in a pew type of thing. I did not. I actually did not start attending church until my freshman year of high school. And it kind of was a peer pressure thing, which I think most people have that story. And it was because some friends wanted me to do something and I was bored. So I started going to a Methodist church. We had a youth group. It was very loose, great people. They were awesome, nice individuals. I learned a lot about foundational principles about how to be a good person and a good citizen. But if you know anything about Methodism, it's kind of considered quote unquote like high church. Like it's more Catholic than not. Like there's a structure to how they do things.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like they read something from the Old Testament, they read something from the New Testament, things like that. So it was just a very bland church experience. It's nothing against the church or the people. They were awesome, but I don't really remember being challenged, or I don't really remember much about like being challenged about Jesus, or I don't remember much about the Bible during that time.
Mm-hmm. This sounds more like cultural Christianity.
Yeah.
Like you go to church because that's where your community is and that's a thing you do and that's the default good person thing. But there weren't a lot of like deep questions about like theology and all of that kind of stuff happening. Very much so.
And I like, part of me feels bad saying that because I feel like I'm dissing them, but it's not that way at all. I will also say I went there my freshman through junior year, and there was a lot of other stuff in my life that I probably just mentally didn't have the capacity to process anything more that they were feeding me. So that's all it was. It was just a place to go. It didn't really change much of who I was. From that aspect, I went to I switched churches because my friend group drastically changed. And it's weird. They're only a half a mile apart, but they are drastically different. And I went from this tiny United Methodist church to this very traditional evangelical Southern Baptist church.
Okay.
And everything changed.
I was going to say there's got to be some culture shock involved in that, I feel like.
There very much was. And that was the summer leading into my senior year of high school, 1993. And today I am still unpacking from that experience.
Mm-hmm. And so at what point in your life did questioning your sexuality come into play? Like, is it a thing like you just like knew from the time that was a question you knew about, or was it something you realized later on in life? Like where do those two things start to intersect? My sexuality,
the whole saying hindsight is 2020, like,
right.
I probably ignored and stuffed and fought till maybe 2007. Mm-hmm. And probably even wrestled hard, maybe even until 2010.
Gotcha. So not a super long time ago.
Right. So Steph and I just got married 51 days ago on April 21st.
But who's counting, right?
I only say that because I literally just filled out an application yesterday.
Okay.
And I looked at the day yesterday and it was 50 days. So, and so our wedding date was actually our 10-year anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And, because we were smart and picked the same date, so we didn't have to memorize multiple anniversaries.
Very pragmatic of you. I like that.
But we didn't come out until just a couple of years ago. And I'm sure we'll get into all the wonderful reasons why. And even several years in our relationship, I still deeply wrestled and fought with myself about it.
Is it like you feel guilty or?
Guilty, shame, along with this incredible amount of love and everything that I had been taught at that church and through my extended college education was that I was disgusting and an abomination and the worst of the worst. And that had been reinforced. And I had said those things myself, And so here I was battling what I had been taught, what I had taught others, and what I was experiencing, and then what I was actually living and experiencing. And unfortunately, I was young, which is no excuse and somewhat of an excuse at the same time.
For sure. I mean, if you're never taught anything else, you can't know anything else.
Right.
To a degree.
And I unfortunately was also taught to not necessarily question, and I wasn't given the right tools to research it when I did have questions. So I had incomplete information. And so here I had this really warped knowledge about a topic that was me. And it was literally killing me, as it has, and, done so many people. It was horrible. It just, I literally can't even find the words to describe the angst that was that period. The absolute elation of the experience of falling in love. And, everybody wants that desire to share that experience. And at the same time, this overwhelming feeling like you are the absolute worst of the worst. It's quite a juxtaposition.
Right. Well, so tell me how you started to unpack that, because at this point, like in my friend circle, at this point in the story is where they would be like, oh yeah, so that's all bullshit, and I actually don't believe any of it anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like everything that you said, you could take those same things word for word and put them in the mouths of so many of my, atheist friends, and it would be exactly the same as their story. And yet here you are, still a Christian.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard because, how do you take... It's a horrible analogy, and it's the only thing coming to my mind, and I've never heard it before. But how do you discount 26 letters of the alphabet when P is the one you're having problems with? I have had experiences all my life, even from my being born. I was in I was a preemie. A very difficult case, and had some illnesses and things as a child, and things happened throughout my life that, in looking back at, I see as divine instances. I see as God working in tandem with medicine and science, to bring about incredible results. So it's kind of like discounting all of the alphabet when it's only one letter that's causing problems.
That makes sense. So basically what I'm hearing, and you can tell me if I'm understanding this right, what I'm hearing is like, so instead of like, well, I'm having this problem with this specific group of people that taught me this specific set of things, instead of throwing the entirety thing out of it, maybe they just taught me the wrong thing about God. Not that God doesn't exist and like it's all crap, but that like maybe their understanding of God is wrong and what they taught me is wrong. So I need to work on my understanding of this instead of jumping to it doesn't exist anymore.
Right. That's totally it. And it wasn't until this extreme later point of life that I realized, hey, there's all this other stuff. There's better education, there's better tools, better resources, etc. that I, as a person, as a woman, have access to go and do my own research, to come to my own understanding about, which, as time has progressed, has enabled me to look back at those people and be like, okay, my anger has lessened a little. Like you're human too. Maybe you were taught badly too. You're just, you don't know better.
Yeah.
Either,
Well, it's hard to know where to assign blame and responsibility because again, like if this is literally all you're taught, then it's hard to learn and know something different. But, I mean, the knowledge and the information is out there,
right?
And you also chose not to avail yourself. So like it's, some of it's what you're taught and some of it is your responsibility. And yeah, like it's hard to unpack the difference.
Yeah.
So, my initial thought is, so I'll be the atheist apologist for a second. Yeah. And so in my mind, what I think of is the emotional investment in a higher power, whatever a person understands that to be in whatever religion they're in, and the sort of fear of losing that and saying like, I now suddenly have an understanding of God that makes who I am okay, whoever that is, and that there might be a level of motivated reasoning behind that. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Just a few years ago, I was diagnosed with having acute myeloid leukemia, in addition to dealing with how do I handle the world when I determine right. When I say, hey, right. I'm gay,
right.
And I'm Christian. So having to face cancer, as well as all of the strange people that come out of the woodwork when you say you have cancer with of their strange, it's weird.
I've got this magic water to sell you.
Here, drink this bleach. It's good for you.
Yeah. I didn't get that one, but I got some really, really close ones. Yeah. So I don't want to say concept because that kind of makes it seem kind of weird, but my understanding became a lot less about rules and a lot more about I'm okay that I don't have all the answers. Mm-hmm.
Which I think that's probably a healthier attitude, like regardless of the situation you're in.
But before it was like we joked the other day about like I used to be the person of like, oh hell yeah, I'll take the debate. Let's go. Like, I would study for hours. I wanted to know every question. I wanted to have the answer to every question, and I wanted to plan the attack or plan my counterattack and this, and And honestly, at the end, if I die and there isn't a God, I'm perfectly okay with that. Because I chose a set of beliefs that I think in the end, I led a good life based on those principles. And if there is a God, then cool, like I still led a good life based on those principles. And before it was more of like a command and conquer,
Yeah.
Where now it's more zen. Like I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm not trying to avoid it, but I'm having trouble like articulating kind of what's
interesting. What's interesting is the way that you describe that actually kind of maps a lot with where I'm at in terms of like my worldview and the way that I see people, and it has a lot more to do with like. So in my mind, like if I die and I face God, I'm like, look at the way that I tried to live my life. And if you're not cool with that, then you're probably not a God I want to have anything to do with. So just like send me to hell. Like, let's just do the thing. Right. And so like, which, I mean, maybe that sounds like an arrogant thing to say as like one of 7 billion people to think that I have stuff figured out. But I've just started to care a lot less. Like I want to have conversations like these because I want to understand people and I want to get to know people and I want to know where people are coming from. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure that it matters as much because like I know you and I know how you treat people and I know the way that you try to live your life. So at the end of the day, like if you're an atheist, if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're a pagan, I don't care. And like it sort of sounds like you and I have come at that like, I started very much on the like I've watched all of the Christopher Hitchens videos on YouTube and I will debate every Christian and I will smash them and I feel like they come from the other side of like you whoever's debating Christopher Hitchens, you've watched all of those YouTube videos and now it's just like I don't know that it really matters because at the end of the day, like again, what matters is how you treat people. But yeah, and I just, I look at things like, so one question that I had that I asked somebody once and I didn't get a very good answer, I don't think. And like, that's okay. 'Cause I don't have all the answers either, but like, I think I've heard a lot of the apologetics for, the fact that the Bible isn't actually anti-gay, that like all of those things are sort of taken out of context by the Westboro types or even like the less assholey people who just say well, like it doesn't automatically mean you're going to hell, but like being gay is just like stealing stuff. like it's still bad, but like as long as you don't act on it, it's okay. And my thing is like, Christianity is thousands of years old. And for most of its entire history, there's been one very specific understanding of its position on the issue. And, it's only in the last few decades that there have been a group of Christians saying like, no, this actually is something different. This actually means something different than we thought. And so in my mind, I'm just thinking like that seems very much like, well, we're just changing with the times because we have to do that to survive. Right. Like you made that post on Facebook the other day about, people who have left their religion, their religion's treatment of queer and trans people is a large factor in the reason why they leave. Right.
Yeah.
And so to me, and maybe this is cynical, maybe it's correct, I don't know, but like that reads to me like a survival strategy.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not that they're actually like, oh, we have a different understanding of what God wants now. Because in my mind, I'm like, so like if this is who God really is, has like every anti-gay Christian over the last thousands of years gone to hell because they hated gay people and God doesn't actually want you to do that? Like, and I mean, obviously I know not every Christian believes in hell, but like, you know what I mean, right? And so I'm just curious on your thoughts on that.
So it's a difficult question because I think for as long as the Bible has existed And as long as a human has read it, we have effed it up. And, like, and quite frankly, as long as any book has existed and a human has read it, we've effed it up. Because we bring to it our own baggage, like our own stuff. And so we see and what makes that even harder is that baggage changes over time. And it can change from hour to hour, like it just makes that so difficult. And I think too, you not only add that human component, you add as like science and like archaeologists and like as we develop understanding of language from ancient times, like as we get like smarter, so to speak, like we gain understanding of ancient times. So we kind of, you hope we as humans grow emotionally as well as intelligently. And so you would hope that we would take that growth to Scripture.
Yeah. I just think, if I wake up tomorrow convinced that a God of some kind exists, like my very next question is going to be, what does that God want from me?
Right.
Like especially if that God holds my like eternal torture or eternal bliss in its hands, right? Or even if my conception of God was different, that like, this God created the universe and just said like, go do your thing. Like I would still like really desperately want to know like what's up with that. Like even if I had a sort of vague conception where it's like, okay, so like, even if I'm a bad person, hell doesn't really exist, because I know there are lots of Christians who don't believe in hell. Yeah. Like I would still really, really, really want to know what the deal is. And for me, like the fact that, because if you're the all-knowing, all-seeing creator of the universe, you should be better at communicating than literally anything or anyone that has ever existed, right?
You'd think.
And and so like just the idea that it is possible for it to be like, let's say like I get fluent in Aramaic and ancient Greek and I can go back and I can read the Bible in its original language, completely in context, and still, get 10 different explanations of like, well, what was Jesus actually trying to say here? Like, what was Paul actually trying to say here? That's just like, I don't know, that makes it hard for me. That makes it hard for me to catch in like I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they had mentioned that like they had a friend who was starting a podcast on biblical sexuality, and he like made a reference to like, well, what the Bible has to say about sexuality. And I was like, man, I don't mean to like, I'm not trying to be rude, but like, I think like y'all got to figure out what the Bible says about sexuality before you try to tell me what it says about sexuality, because I don't think you know. Like, because I can talk to 10 different Christians and get 10 different explanations about what it says. And, that would make me uncomfortable. Well, I'm an atheist, and that's kind of part of the reason. So that did that ambiguity made me uncomfortable enough that like I don't know that there's enough here for me to hold on to. And adding to that the historical context of the way that folks like us have been treated throughout history and are still today, even if it's to a slightly lesser extent, that's just it makes it hard for me to understand why folks stick around, if that makes sense.
I think too, like the reason why I still say that I'm a Christian and that I'm gay, despite all the people who say otherwise, that I can't be or whatever, is that, like I said, over and over, I have experiences that prove them wrong, and that those experiences outweigh them. But like, it wasn't until I did the research for myself and I decided, because I think that's the biggest problem is like people just want to believe other people. They don't want to put the work in, basically. And I think that goes for anybody, no matter what religion or not,
Yep. Lots of recent experience with that in our own community.
So I don't think that, it doesn't matter. But if you do the research, you read the stuff, and then you have to decide, okay, well, I did all this. Now what am I going to do with it? And ultimately it came down to me saying, you know what? Like, we took this stuff out of context, and we've done it before. Like, can we talk about slavery here? And when I did that, when I decided, and I kind of made my peace with it, like, this sounds real cheesy, and I will fully admit it does. Like, I felt at peace. Like, okay, let's do this. If you don't like me, if you think I'm going to hell, that's your problem. And, sometimes it pisses me off, and I get in my little, I want to debate you and fight you on it kind of thing,
right.
But I just think, I wish, I wish God would just be like, hey, you're idiots,
right.
Or, somebody like super freaking smart that like everybody agrees on and likes, wouldn't be like, hey, you're freaking idiots, But I don't know, like, and being a woman, like when I went back and got my degree, it was very difficult. And I had to do a lot of research because, like, Paul is not, he doesn't come across very friendly to women.
No, definitely not.
And Christianity has not been horribly fabulous to the ladies.
Right.
But there's culture and context around that too, and maybe I just am stubborn and hard-headed and like picking, yes, I'll be a gay female pastor or something.
Right.
Maybe I just like the hard road.
No, listen, I can respect that. I being a contrarian, like debating, like I get the appeal, and sometimes I fall back into that too, even though I try super hard not to be that person. Ari, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have anything?
Man, I'm trying to think back on my experience. So I was, I don't know, raised like my mom started taking me to church when I was, I don't know, like 9-10 years old, and it didn't really stick at that time. Even though we went every week, and I went to youth group. We went to kind of like the first church that you said. It was a Disciples of Christ church, so it was different denomination, but it was very much like Callie was talking about, the not really asking the hard questions, just kind of, as long as you believe in Jesus, you're good here. The sermons are about being a good person, that kind of thing. So there was nothing too, off-putting about that. But I never really took it too seriously. And then I went to, when I moved from Texas to Arkansas, in between my sophomore and junior years of high school, and then I started going to a fundamentalist Christian school for the last 2 years of high school. And, at that time, I had realized my sexuality. I hadn't realized my gender yet. And so that was an interesting experience. It was a very you're not supposed to be, you can't be a gay Christian, you can't be a bisexual Christian, that kind of thing. That's a sin. And there were a lot of people who did the whole, like Kelly said, like, it's just don't act on it. It's okay if God made you that way. He's made us all with our struggles, but just don't act gay and you're fine.
Right.
And there was a brief period when I went there when I actually did like really start believing in Christianity. And that only lasted for about like 9 months. And I was like real into Jesus. And I'm trying to think back on like, how did I rationalize being, pansexual and a somewhat evangelical Christian at the same time? And the only thing I can think of is I just kind of decided, without really reading into anything, that God was okay with, homosexuality, just because like, well, I love God and God wouldn't be mean. So, so why would God hate me, if I love him? That doesn't make any sense. And now, now that I know more about the Bible than I did then, I think if I had really read and studied it, I would have been a lot more like, whoa, the Bible actually says some pretty bad things, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. But I think at the time, I just kind of magically rationalized it like, oh, yeah, of course he doesn't hate homosexuality. That doesn't make any sense. God is love, all of that. And I never really, like you said, took the time to look into it. So I don't know. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, I just I went to a Pentecostal church with my grandma for a while, and there was definitely a lot of preaching against homosexuality from the pulpit, and I mean, I was a kid. Like, I refused to go to youth group. I wanted to go to adult church with my grandma. I think part of it was just because like I was a kid and I was nervous and I didn't like want to be away from my grandma, but also it was like I'm getting the adult stuff. Like, this is the real stuff. It's not the kiddie stuff, right? And I only just barely like scratched the surface of knowing who I was as a kid. So like, I never really asked those questions because I didn't have a super intuitive understanding of who I was at the time. I do remember I was going to church when Ellen DeGeneres came out. And I remember that the pastor did this big diatribe from the stage talking about it. And he was talking about like all of these companies that had removed their advertising from her show as like, like a protest, like, oh, we're not going to support gayness. And I remember one of those companies was Wendy's, the fast food place. And I remember my grandma decided to take us to Wendy's that day, like specifically because she's like, oh, then she actually said this to like the 16-year-old kid working the drive-thru, like, yeah, we appreciate your strong stand on morality. And like the 16-year-old kid in the drive-thru, like, I'm sure, like she just,
okay.
Yeah. And I mean, this was so long ago and I remember it pretty clearly. I mean, just this blank look on her face, like, oh yeah, somebody else said that earlier. Here's your food. Have a good day. Like, but I do remember, as time went on, and I was more aware of who I was, I did sort of ask those questions a little bit, but I mean, it only took me until I was like 17 or so to become an atheist. And so that actually kind of made me even more of like the angry atheist, like, oh yeah, like God's supposed to hate people like me. So like, F that guy and like F anybody who believes this stuff too. And like, then that I didn't really struggle with it in the religious sense, but it sort of helped fuel my like firebrandness at the beginning, because of that one experience that I had. I didn't realize at all that like there was a group of Christians who were like, no, like if you're gay, it's cool. Like it doesn't matter. Not a big deal to me. And I mean, trans is an entirely different thing. So yeah, it was kind of a weird journey for me too. So yeah, I don't know. And I feel like there's motivated reasoning on all sides. Like if we're trying to be completely objective here, like obviously I'm an atheist, so I believe one thing about the universe, but like I feel like there might be a bit of motivated reasoning. Like if you're gay and you're atheist, that's like, well, that's a reason for God not to exist. Cause if God exists, I'm in trouble.
It could be. I mean, most people that I talk to anyway would say like, mistreatment from the church was what started me questioning my religion, but it wasn't the reason why I decided that I didn't believe in God. It was because I started, looking into the Bible, looking into the history of Christianity, looking into other religions, and realizing that, I didn't see any convincing arguments or any evidence for the existence of this God. So I think it's gotten a lot of people started down that path. And I'm sure there are people out there who are just like, well, God doesn't like gay people and I'm gay, so I don't like God.
Right.
Maybe it's just like our privilege, as being part of the atheist community. We know a lot of like intellectuals and stuff who really take their time to think through it. But I don't really know what the stats on that are as far as how that breaks down. Like, did you start questioning your religion because of mistreatment about your sexuality or gender, or did you leave it only because of that?
Right. Well, and I hesitate to make that argument because like there's so much of that, like, well, you just love your sin, and like I don't want to feed into that argument. Part of me is like, yeah, I do love my sin. So
sin
like,
is
come at me,
delicious.
bro.
I know. I was just reading. The stat that Callie you quoted talked about. I think it was 2016. I think was the year, or maybe it was 2013. It was talking about 18 to 33-year-olds. That 1/3 had left the church because of treatment of gay and trans individuals. And then I don't remember the year, but they had done a survey of LGBTQ individuals. They listed those particular acronyms, where earlier the Pew Center listed out the full acronym with the I and the A afterwards. And they had said that I think it was 26% identified as highly religious, but they didn't go on and say like if that was Christianity or Buddhism or whatever.
Right.
I was just reading, there's a book called LGBTQ Stats that it's just chocked full of a bunch of different stats from.
That's interesting. I'm gonna remember to put that in the show notes. Look at that.
It's really cool. It's like, I think the Kindle edition's like $10 or something, and it's just got all different kinds of stats and all different kinds of categories or whatever. But I just found that interesting because I think whether it's Christian or whatever, like I think we tend to be thought of as not necessarily religious or have some sort of faith system, when it's evident, according to these statistics, that we do.
No, totally. Well, and I was actually surprised because I had that conception coming into the queer and trans community, and I thought like there's probably not that many religious people in this community, and if they are, they probably at least get the folks who aren't. Like they understand that like, yeah, like our folks have trouble with the church, and so like folks who don't engage with that, like I get it. And I was shocked. I mean, so this statistic, depending on the survey, it's either like 49 or 51% of the queer and trans community as a whole, like would tick none on the religion box. And then that doesn't necessarily mean they call themselves atheists, but like they don't actively follow a religion, right? So, I mean, that's like half the community is religious of some kind. And I was actually shocked sort of the other direction in that, and how sort of evangelical and somewhat aggressive, religious queer and trans folks can be, even understanding the history of the community. And that's even like in the context of like being the atheist arguing for more religious inclusion, like recognizing like, yeah, half of our community is religious. We just need to understand that like Christianity isn't the entirety of that. Right. So like if we're trying to be inclusive, we need to think about Muslims, and we need to think about pagans, and we need to think about like different flavors of Christianity, et cetera, et cetera. And like, I was kind of shocked at the resistance to that. And I guess I shouldn't be. And that, I think so much of the journey of like getting involved in different communities and stuff is finding out that like pretty much any problem we can identify in a community exists pretty broadly in any community. And like, there are unique ways that it plays out. But like, if we're talking about like, exceptionalism, evangelicalism, sexual assault problems, all of that sort of stuff, like it all exists everywhere. And, I think anytime people start to feel like they're better or above that, like you're gonna be wrong.
Yeah.
Regardless. So like, cause there's a tendency to be like, oh, I found my people, it's better here. And like, sure, like maybe it is some places, but it's not other places.
I will say that, and my wife can greatly attest to this. And what's funny is it didn't happen during the stint with cancer. It really happened afterwards. I think we've probably all heard of the dark night of your soul kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I really went through that afterwards, everything. Like I deeply considered walking away from my faith, from, just being like, I've had it with the church, I've had it with Christianity, I've had it, like, even though I've had this 42-year experience where I can look back and, point to things that I, feel like are divine instances where it was just like, I just had enough. Like we had just been beaten to a pulp by people who say they are Christians. Like, quite frankly, I came unglued. I just had enough. And at the bottom, I just decided that, I can't, when it's all said and done, I can't, it's not about anybody else. Mm-hmm. Like, I have to make the decision for myself and then for my wife and what might be of our family someday. Yeah. And so I kind of, to use the buzzword, deconstructed, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And even now I would say I'm in the process of putting it all back together. So
I can respect that. I think a lot of us have made that journey, even if it plays out and ends up in different places. Well, this has been a cool conversation. I definitely feel like I understand things a little bit better, aside from how to construct a sentence, apparently. Thanks for coming over. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for your insight. Thanks for being honest. Thanks for not getting mad when we push back and ask hard questions. I think
you should title this episode "Christian Owned."
The Gaytheist Pwn Christian. Oh God, I wish
you can do it. That might get you some
Thea
clicks
smacked
and stuff.
down with logic and reason.
There's a tiny part of me that wishes I didn't have the integrity to not do that.
We'd get so many hits though, Callie.
I know. I'm
you
sorry.
Just put go old school and put psych in really small letters.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Parentheses, not clickbait.
Oh, God. Well, that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. If you think what we do here is important, please share this around to your friends. Search the Gaytheist Manifesto on Facebook and Twitter to find us there. I'm at Gaytheist Callie on Twitter, and you can email us at podcast@thegaytheistmanifesto.com. We are a part of the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative. We're a group of trans podcasting badasses working to bring more trans voices into podcasting and other content creation. Search the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative on Facebook for more info. And now's the time where Ari does an outro.
Well, we have probably all seen those signs that the street preachers hold up of the lists of all the things that God hates, like
yes.
God hates feminists, God hates Dungeons and Dragons.
I score very high on all of those lists. I score very high.
We like to go through and check off the ones that apply and see how much God hates us. Well, maybe God doesn't hate fags after all. Maybe those signs are wrong. So what does he hate?
It was figs.
It was figs. I left that off the list. I have here the complete and definitive list of things that God hates, and I welcome you to play along. God hates pants with fake pockets. Scam service dog registries, which, by the way, in the U.S. is all of them. The Decemberists. He hates gender. When someone asks someone else a question and they respond with, I don't know, and then they immediately go on to answer the question when they just claim they don't know the answer to the question. People who ask easily Googleable questions on my Facebook page, which is Ari Stillman, by the way, instead of just taking 5 seconds to educate themselves. Thin crust pizza. I mean, come on, you're paying more money for less food. It makes no sense at all. aristillman4@gmail.com. Just that. He hates that. He's very specific about things that he hates. People who assume that I'm going to be a therapist just because I'm a grad student in psychology. Online deals that look awesome until you get to the checkout and it's $18.76 for 6 to 10 week shipping on a $2.99 stainless steel water-resistant reinforced Pan-Asian style pencil holder. People who say acrost instead of across. The incredible difficulty of finding appropriate professional attire if you're a petite transmasculine person. Zach eating my snacks.
Yep, not a fan of Zach eating Ari's snacks. Not a
When
fan.
Penelope suddenly decides that she's scared of automatic sliding doors out of nowhere and refuses to walk through them and embarrasses me in front of all the people trying to get into the Safeway.
Oh, poor Pee.
People who complain that the Cis Are Getting Out of Hand podcast is cisphobic, because what if there was a podcast called The Trans Are Getting Out of Hand? How would you feel about that? That would be bigoted. God doesn't like those people. God also hates bees, Jeremiah's puns, presentations where the speaker just reads straight off their PowerPoint the whole time, raw onions, The Lick, the SJW Circle Jerk podcast, and the thing that God hates most of all, lost memes.
15. I scored
15.
a 15.
10.
10? Awesome. All right. So
I don't think
if
that's
you're
acceptable.
listening,
I think God hates you.
if you're
Okay.
listening, let's go to facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto and share your scores. We're interested to know exactly how much God hates all of us. If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto and make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. And if you can't do that, you can give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share us around to your friends. It all helps and it all makes a difference. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know that there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things, and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is The Gaytheist Manifesto.
The joke is that God hates all the things that I hate. That's the funny. Good funny.